right, let's talk now about car financing. Motorists behind the 699 Rand car advertising deal are up in arms. This after Satinsi Group, the company behind the deal, noted on its website that it had dissolved its agreement with the media company Blue Lakes Trading and Promotions. Joining us for more insight is Thupayatlase. He's the head of legal at the National Consumer Commission. But before we talk to him, let's look at what Peter Chills from Hello Peter had to say yesterday.
The banks are obviously involved in the financing of these vehicles as well. The sad thing is that certainly according to the complaints on hellopeter.com is that there are many, understand that we're talking about 17,000 vehicles that are on the road with these huge great stickers wrapped around their motor cars, so that there are many people that have been beguiled by this approach. And I think that what we're really looking at is whether the Satinsi Group is going to be accountable.
Andy, so that's the question that I think Peter is really putting to you. As the National Consumer Commission, are you going to be able to hold the Satinsi Group accountable?
Well, it's a tricky one. You see, let me first explain the difficulty that consumers are going to be faced with, if at all the National Consumer Commission is the one that is going to have to deal with these problems. The nature of the contracts that these people, the consumer signs, which is a secondary agreement to the actual financing agreement. Actually, the nature of it is that the consumer, it's not a consumer in the sense within the definition of the concept in the Consumer Protection Act. Is actually a supplier of services. Now, that being the case, it means that we may not be able, you don't have jurisdiction to be able to deal with those complaints, because the person who comes to complain quite often is what ordinarily would be a consumer. But in this instance, because of the nature of the contract that they sign, is not a consumer but a supplier of services. And it's even like that in the contract that they sign themselves, because whoever is behind placing that advert is actually being provided with a service. He's not a service provider, he's been provided with a service. So the consumer who at that point is actually buying the vehicle is a service provider, not a consumer.
Andy, Lindsay Williams in Cape Town. The very fact that we're talking about this tonight and the very fact that we talked about it last night means that the whole thing is starting to blow up, it's starting to unravel. I'm not talking about your organisation, but what about other organisations that should have had a look at this thing and saw $699 for a brand new car, 17,000 cars driving around on South African roads and on South African streets, and would have said to themselves, well, wait a second, there's a few alarm bells ringing here, there's a few red lights flashing, maybe we should investigate. Instead of waiting for the thing to blow up of its own volition. There's something missing here.
Look, I can obviously tell you what we believe it's wrong with the whole arrangement. But the question of what us as the National Consumer Commission is going to do, it's obviously it's a problematic one for me, because we are a creature of statute, clearly, and our mandate and our jurisdiction, it's clearly defined. That I'm sitting here does not mean that I cannot be able to say to those people that these are red flags, these are the problems. Or, for example, I cannot comment about the manner that, the message that is being carried in the vehicle, for example. It does mean that I cannot comment on whether I believe it's misleading or not within the definition in the Consumer Protection Act. Doesn't mean that. But in as far as us really being able to investigate this, our mandate, it's limited by exactly what I've just said, that we are, the National Consumer Commission, we deal with consumer complaints. And to the extent that the complainant in this instance we will not be able to define him as a consumer. We are limited in that regard, yes.
So, Andy, doesn't the principle of caveat emptor still apply in these situations? I mean, ultimately, one can only do so much to protect people from their own ignorance or their own stupidity. And in fact, if these schemes are as they may well be, ultimately, it's the responsibility of the person who enters into a contract of this nature to do their homework.
It is, yes, it is. You see, it's easier said than done, than to say that you must do your own homework. see, by and large, the reason why a lot of people get drawn to this is exactly the message that I've got a problem with, that is being carried on a vehicle to say you can drive a vehicle from 699. The message itself clearly was crafted in a way that it's, I would use the word misleading, with due respect, because clearly the message that is being carried is to say you can drive a vehicle for 699, but the person or the institution that is placing that message on the vehicle is ultimately not responsible to decide or determine how much you are paying. It is the bank. The agreement that you sign is a separate one from your actual main financing agreement. So in a way, they've got no right to actually carve that message in such a manner that is actually conveying a message that you can actually drive. Because like I'm saying, ultimately, it's only the bank that can decide how much you are going to pay, because they decide on rates, on whatever primary agreement that you enter into. He who is putting that message, actually, this is misleading. And I've seen on the set where it says there's going to be this separation between the two companies, as if there are two companies after all. There aren't, because I don't understand the value for the so-called blue whatever marketing company. The value for them, it's actually non-existence. The whole value is for Sustainability, because it's the one that's actually selling vehicles. Now, to want to come up with this rather thin line between this marketing company and this company that actually sells vehicles, it's actually a fallacy. There is nothing like that. There is only one company that is marketing its product. What is the benefit to the so-called marketing company? There is none. The only benefit is actually to the person who's selling. So this attempt to try and divide and say there is a difference between the two, I find it problematic.
Andy, I want us to go back to the role of the banks in this. The argument that's on the table is that the car financing agreement that the consumer/service provider signs with the bank is based on the fact that they have this additional income. Without the rebate they would have gotten from Satinsky or Blue Lakes, they would not have qualified for that car financing loan. So in that instance, we're still dealing with the consumer, because they're still dealing with the bank under false pretenses that they have a steady flow of income that allows them to qualify for a Renault Clio as against a Tata.
See, let me tell you where we are going to hit a brick wall when it comes to actually bringing in banks into this whole thing. The main financing agreement, yes, is with the bank. And there are certain criteria that the bank uses to decide if you qualify for a vehicle or not. Now, as to whether the banks will be wrong in taking into account that kind of an income or the stability thereof, because the issue here is just how guaranteed that is for the bank to take into account. I think it's as much guaranteed as your being employed is. Because, I mean, the bank can say, look, at the end of the day, it's up to the consumer to disclose to us his income. And if the consumer decides on whether this income, that is dependent on another contract that is signed somewhere, it's stable enough for them to take into account, the bank will take it into account. The real issue really is just how secure this income is for the bank to take it into account. And I think that's not a question for the bank to maybe yes, some kind of a campaign to say to consumers, educate them the realities of this contract in as far as. Are you
saying it's not the bank's responsibility to
decide,
to verify whether these income streams that the person says they have to offset their disposable income are actually guaranteed?
But you see, that's the thing. Banks, it's when a bank makes a decision as to whether it's going to finance you or not, it makes that based on certain income streams that are coming in. The stability or instability thereof, it becomes quite a dicey one, because I can say, I can be, upset that the bank refused to finance me because I'm selling vegetables by the corner of the street, and I believe that is, and the bank can say no. And there's been issues like that as to what exactly really is business. And in this sense, one can say this may be, this may not be. The real issue that we have to deal with this really is this contract. And like I'm saying, it's going to be very difficult for us to. It may as well be that, given the experiences and everything, the bank may just be forced, into looking at this as not that stable an income for them to take into account in deciding whether they finance you or not. But it becomes a little bit difficult to really be hard on banks to say you should.
And we appreciate your passion and appreciate you coming through to studio. And that's where we leave it for Business